I'm Jennifer I from the Atlanta City Council, representing District 6 and this year's chair of the Finance Executive Committee.
Do you have a question, comment, or a suggestion related to the City of Atlanta's proposed fiscal year 2021 budget? The Atlanta City Council wants to hear from residents and stakeholders. Which services do you feel need to be prioritized in the fiscal year 2021 budget, which begins July 1st? The general fund budget is set at $673.4 million. There are several ways to reach out and submit your questions and comments to the Council today and during the virtual Town Hall meeting Tuesday, June 2nd at 6:15 p.m. Send your email to budgettalk@atlantaga.gov. If you'd prefer, you can submit a video of your question, as long as it's 15 seconds or less. For social media, tweet us at ATL Council using the hashtag ATLBudget. Submit your questions by messaging us on our Facebook page at ATL Council. To call in your questions, dial 404-546-1928, or you can text us at 404-548-2885.
We know how important the city budget is to you. We welcome your thoughts and your feedback. Thank you. Hi, I'm Jennifer I from the Atlanta City Council, representing District 6 and this year's chair of the Finance Executive Committee.
Do you have a question, comment, or a suggestion related to the City of Atlanta's proposed fiscal year 2021 budget? The Atlanta City Council wants to hear from residents and stakeholders. Which services do you feel need to be prioritized in the fiscal year 2021 budget, which begins July 1st? The general fund budget is set at $673.4 million. There are several ways to reach out and submit your questions and comments to the Council today and during the virtual Town Hall meeting Tuesday, June 2nd at 6:15 p.m. Send your email to budgettalk@atlantaga.gov. If you'd prefer, you can submit a video of your question, as long as it's 15 seconds or less. For social media, tweet us at ATL Council using the hashtag ATLBudget. Submit your questions by messaging us on our Facebook page at ATL Council. To call in your questions, dial 404-546-1928, or you can text us at 404-548-2885.
We know how important the city budget is to you. We welcome your thoughts and your feedback. Thank you.
Everyone, this is Councilmember Jennifer Ide. The time is now 10 a.m. on Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020, and today starts our second full week of the City Council review of the Mayor's proposed year 21 municipal budget. I'm joined this morning by my Vice Chair, Howard Shook, of the Finance Executive Committee, and members of the City Council will be cycling in and out as their schedules permit. We'll do a roll call before the beginning of each session so the public can know who's online. All of the presentations and budget summaries were emailed to council members last night around 10:51 p.m. and this morning again at 9:39. The public may view the hearing on Channel 26, Facebook Live, Twitter, City Council homepage, and YouTube, as well as listening via the conference bridges. All of the presentations are available on the council site located under the Finance Executive Committee's fiscal year 21 budget page. Today, we're going to be hearing from the following departments. We're going to kick off with the Department of Human Resources. At 10 o'clock, we'll have the executive offices at 11 a.m. In the afternoon, we'll have the Department of Procurement at 1 p.m., and we'll be hearing from City Council at 2 p.m. So I'll ask Ms. Kempson-Wright or somebody from City Council staff if you'll do a quick roll call of City Council members, and then we will get started with the Department of Human Resources.
Yes, good morning. Council President Moore. Councilmember Smith. Here. Councilmember Faroki. Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Winslow. Councilmember Archibald.
Here.
Councilmember Shook. Councilmember Mazakite.
Here.
Councilmember Hillis. Councilmember Boone.
Present.
Councilmember Overstreet.
Present.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Present.
Councilmember Bund. Councilmember Westmoreland. Councilmember Dickens.
Here.
Madam Chair, there are a total of 9 attendees on the line at this time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kempson-Wright, and I am sure people will cycle in and out throughout the morning and the afternoon. So we're going to start this morning with the Department of Human Resources. I'm going to welcome our Interim Commissioner, Jeffrey Norman, and ask you, Ms. Norman, if you'll introduce the rest of your team, who you have with you, and then you can just kick off your presentations when you're ready. And for my colleagues, the Human Resources is on page 315 of your budget book. Mr. Norman, you have the mic.
All right. Good morning. And thank you, Council Member Ide, and all of the members of the Atlanta City Council for allowing the Department of Human Resources to present regarding our FY21 budget this morning. I am joined on the line by the Deputy Commissioner for Human Resources, Danielle Nichols, as well as the Director of Employee Benefits, Louis Amis. And this morning we will be walking you through the FY21 budget presentation. So if we can go ahead and move to page 2 of the presentation, we will then provide you with information relative to our anticipated FY21 budget. And I'd also be remiss if during this pandemic time that I did not thank all of the diligent preparation and services that have been provided by all of the employees within the Department of Human Resources, as well as citywide through the employee workforce and all of the challenging times that they have had to face. But as we look at slide 2, summary of current operations, you will see at the top of the chart a summary that deals with the budget trends for the Department of Human Resources. That will show you kind of the 5-year outlook And as you can see by the trend, the budget for the HR department has seen an increase over the last 5 years. The average historical budget for the Department of Human Resources has ranged about $13 million. What you'll also notice as you look at those trends is that you will see that there is a 5% decrease in budgeting from FY16 to FY21. That's primarily due to personnel adjustments over time and also distribution of costs associated with psychological services that have been allocated to respective departments as part of their internal budgets. At the bottom of the chart, you'll see the funded FTE positions within the general fund. You will see that for FY20, we're at 75.25. For FY21, we are looking at funded positions of 61.85 in the general fund. And currently, across all funds, we are hovering around 115 field positions department-wide. And we can move to the next slide. And so on the next slide, which is summary of current operations, wanted to just provide for FY20 some of the highlights of those things that were major initiatives for the Department of Human Resources. The first of that being that the Department of Human Resources spent a significant amount of time executing process improvements to improve our recruitment and onboarding timelines so that we could address departmental vacancies. And so what we did was redesign our processes and protocols to move toward reducing our time to fill rate from 67 days to 35 days. And a big part of that was the establishment of the Vacancy Review Board as part of that process. And we have previously provided detailed information regarding that before a Finance Executive Committee. And that has been very helpful as we have moved forward with being more efficient in the recruitment and onboarding process. Secondly, we spent a significant amount of time as well on making sure that we reconcile Oracle HR position records to make sure that we had reliable data integrity so that we can continue to measure our budgeted head count on an ongoing basis. And that is obviously extremely important, not only during the year, but as we approach budget to ensure that as we prepare the personnel paper that we have complete alignment for those priorities of the administration as well as the City Council. Also wanted to note that based on legislation passed by the City Council, we were able to effectively and successfully implement the Day One Benefits Program for all new hires. That initiative went into effect January 1st of this year. We also wanted to point out, and I know we spoke a little bit relative to this during the union budget briefing, we have established standing HR union leadership meetings in support of the Mayor's One Atlanta initiative. And so not only do I, as the interim commissioner, meet with union representatives on a monthly basis, we also have a direct pipeline through our employee and labor relations group. And lastly, as we move to really relying more upon technology and the capabilities that we have at our disposal, we have continued to establish performance metrics that will inform decisions that we make in the HR sphere. And those are things that we continue to track on a monthly basis. And those are also data points that we provide as part of our quarterly updates. We can move to the next slide, and that will be FY20 highlights. And so as you take a look, I just wanted to provide you on this first page with some representations of some of those initiatives that the Department of Human Resources has spearheaded. And we have definitely enjoyed the partnership with the mayor, definitely on wellness initiatives. And you'll see, things such as the Kaiser Walk represented here, where the city has obviously, excelled as a fit city. And we have participated and received that distinction over the last 8 years. You will also see the continued partnership in such programs as Hooked on Books that we provide on behalf of employees and members of the community, and for those books that we think have a direct connect and benefit for our employee workforce. And so want to, definitely thank, those council members such as Councilmember Overstreet, Councilmember Boone, and others who routinely participate in those events along with us. And you can see some of those represented in the visuals that are provided here on our FY20 highlight portion. And so at this point, I would also like to welcome our Deputy Commissioner, Danielle Nichols, who will walk you through the next slide of highlights and also provide some background information of some of the other highlights for human resources during the FY20 year. Danielle?
Thank you, Commissioner Norman. Good morning, Madam Chair and Council members. Danielle Nichols, Deputy Commissioner. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, excellent. If we can advance to the next slide, please. Slide number 5. So I would like to take a moment to dovetail into more FY20 highlights. Talent acquisition conducted a hefty amount of job fairs, virtual job readiness workshops, and one-on-one resume writing sessions. Hiring blitz were expanded to 5 departments, and this expansion successfully resulted in filling over 70 critical maintenance vacancies at the airport. Additionally, recruiting efforts resulted in the hiring of 200 police officers. We partnered with second chance programs such as Wellspring Living, PAC-3 Workforce Reentry, and Georgia Work, where 28 participants were hired in positions with the Department of Customer Service, ATL 311, Public Works, Watershed Management, and Parks and Recreation. Our organizational development team conducted 9 new employee orientation classes with a total of 450 employees in attendance. There were 36 active shooter classes coordinated in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Emergency Preparedness and APD, resulting in 1,265 employees completing active shooter training. Virtual new hire orientation sessions were developed upon migrating to a remote working environment as a result of the pandemic, which allowed us to effectively acclimate new hires during our remote working period. Benefits completed contract renewal and open enrollment process under the enhanced ATL cloud system for the 2020 benefit plan year. Physical activity and stretch pilot programs were developed in conjunction with EAP for the Department of Public Works and Watershed Management. Our EAP program continues to thrive by providing exemplary psychological services and employee assistance with providing around-the-clock crisis management and response, employee and program consultation and confidential counseling services, employee participation in healthy rewards programs such as biometric screening, online health risk assessments, and annual physical exams increased by 20%. And chronic disease management programs were expanded through the Wellness Center and contracted health vendors. If we can advance to the next slide, please, slide number 6. So proposed budget changes impact both personnel and professional services. As it pertains to personnel, we are proposing a 12% reduction in salary costs resulting from decreasing FTE count by 8. With regards to professional services, there is a slight uptick proposed for FY21 to properly align contractual and operational expenditures. There will be a continuation of services with Sterling Info Systems, LinkedIn, Career Builder, and Xerox contract agreements. So we will look to squeeze professional services to support and apply additional resources, along with evaluating how we can further introduce efficiencies. We will also introduce in FY21 virtual employee training to become more efficient from a training perspective, enhance EAP service delivery, and market studies for job pricing. So now I would like to transition the presentation back to Commissioner Norman.
Thank you, Danielle. And so if we can go to the next slide, which is titled Key Priorities for FY21. And so just wanted to bring to the attention of Council 4 specific initiatives for FY21 that the Department of Human Resources will be placing focus. The first is in the area of internal operations. And so our intent is to continue to drive process improvement through realignment of the HR operating model to ensure optimal performance and efficiency. And we will be focused specifically on centralization of HR transactions to ensure that we have conformity of process and protocols. And that will not only move us toward greater efficiencies, it would also allow us to maximize utilization of our internal resources. The second is in the area of data analytics. And the goal there is to make sure that we are leveraging our technological platforms to their full extent to ensure that we can make data-driven decisions as we continue to attract, manage, and retain employees. And the ultimate goal there is to assist our commissioners and executive leaders to make better decisions as they continue to interact and to develop our city workforce. The third area will be policies and procedures. We will undertake to refresh all of our HR policies, and we will be coupling that with identification of training needs and conducting appropriate training. And part of that, as we have learned through this pandemic period, is utilization of virtual learning opportunities. And so we will move forward with haste with those virtual learning opportunities for FY21. And the last area is under employee benefits, where we will be moving forward to establish, an OPEB task force so that we continue to assess the current and future obligations of the city's post-employment health insurance benefits. And we can go to the next slide. And so the last slide just wanted to provide for council the members of the senior leadership team within the Department of Human Resources. And that will end our presentation, and we are available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. I do want to recognize we've been joined by a few other city council members since roll call. Council President Felicia Moore has joined us. Howard Shook from District 7 and my Vice Chair for Finance Exec. District 4, Cleta Winslow is with us. District 9, Justin Hillis, and District 2, Amir Faroki. So we have almost all of council on with us this morning. And council members, if you all will send me a message if you would like to speak or have a question for Human Resources, I will get you in the lineup. While I'm waiting to get my lineup ready, I will. I do have one question for you, Commissioner Norman, and thank you for both an informative and concise presentation. Can we click back to the slide? I think it was the one right before this that had the key initiatives for the fiscal. Yes, thank you. I think that these are great goals for the coming year, particularly where we are going to have, we're just going to have to manage money and therefore people as well, tighter in this economic environment that we have. And I'm really looking at the data analytics and the, how we do best manage and retain employees. I think we all know that likely we're going to have a large group of employees who are currently with the Department of Corrections at some point over time be ready to move to other departments. Can you tell us a little bit more about what sort of training opportunities and what support HR gives when there are current City of Atlanta employees, in one department who, for one reason or another, need to switch departments? What sort of training and support and decision making HR helps the departments with in those situations?
Yes, Councilmember Ide. And so in those situations where we are looking, whether it be individually or whether it be for a larger group of employees, we normally do perform a skill assessment of that target audience to make a determination, first, whether or not there are areas within the city that those employees are already qualified to transition into. And so even with your example of corrections staff, it may be that you have sworn members within the Department of Corrections who actually may already have the eligible skill set to transfer over into some of our other public safety agencies. And some of those folks may also be in a posture, where with specified training in some other areas that they easily qualify to fill some of those vacant mission critical positions as well. In those situations where we identify that there is not a direct transferable skill, obviously we look at, the background of those employees and make determinations whether or not there are internal or external training programs that we can steer those employees into so that we can still utilize and benefit from those employees' historical knowledge in other areas throughout the city. And so it's really doing an overall assessment to see what types of resources we can make available so it's much easier for those individuals to transition into other needed positions throughout the city.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, I am going to, it looks like Howard Shook is next in line, and again, colleagues, just send me a message if you want to get in the lineup. Mr. Shook, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Norman, in terms of vacancies, I understand that unfunded vacancies have been eliminated across the board, but beyond that, things are still a little murky for me. So could you please provide us with a spreadsheet showing across departments how many vacancies were eliminated, how many survived, and the dollar values?
Yes, sir. And so thank you, Councilmember Shook. Yes, and so we are working on preparing that spreadsheet so we can distribute that to yourself and members of council. And I know that we talked a little bit on our initial overview call about field funded positions and those unfunded positions at the beginning of this budget hearing. What I would just share with you in addition to that from a vacancy standpoint, obviously we are looking at the ability to abolish a lot of the unfunded vacant positions. As we have continued to examine the respective needs from a mission critical nature, I did want to share that we do not anticipate that, and I think we talked a little bit about this, but just wanted to further amplify that, that abolishment will not be applied to sworn positions. And so we will provide you with clarity relative to those numbers shortly, and we'll make sure we get that to the full council.
Thank you. Thank you. That'd be very helpful. Secondly, during Pace's budget comments and presentation, they brought up some process issues, and you committed to dialoguing with them to try to sort through those. What's the status of that?
And so is this relative to the reclassifications?
Well, there were a number of concerns raised. Some were more clearly fleshed out than others. Just my point is that I was grateful that you said right away, yeah, let's start working through these, and I just was hoping to find that that discussion is in fact underway.
Yeah, and so as always, I do frequently have discussions with Ms. Pagnotta as well as Mr. Thornhill. So we do continue to work through those respective issues. Also have, more recently, as I indicated in the presentation, in addition to AFSCME and PACE, we have also started monthly meetings with the fire union as well. And we are committed to making sure that we have those ongoing discussions so that we can address those perceived or real issues and reflect those in the policies and protocols that we execute on behalf of the world.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. And lastly, how do you see this OPEB task force being constructed and moving forward?
Okay. And I have Lewis, our Director of Employee Benefits, and so I'll give Lewis an opportunity to speak to that.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair and Council President, other council members. The task force, the OPEB task force, what we're seeing is we're working now with finance and with the administration to move forward in looking at ways to move in terms of OPEB costs and how we're going to handle this moving forward in the future. So I anticipate at some point in time in the near future that will be a meeting where we'll all meet together and start to look at ways to address OPEB and any concerns that may be related to those expenses in the future.
And Councilmember Shook, so I just wanted to compliment that statement from Mr. Ami. Obviously, the goal will be, and I think this was referenced by the COO when we talked a little bit at the beginning of the budget process. We will formalize a process to examine these issues. And we will obviously, work to make sure we establish a communication network with the City Council so that they can be fully engaged in that process as we work through that process. So we will be putting a more formalized plan together, and we will be sharing that with Finance Executive Committee.
Okay, well, in closing, I hope to find that that's going to include council and organized labor a little bit more up front and less as merely recipients of what some other group is proposing. But so I look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shook. And Mr. Norman, to follow up on Mr. Shook's question about the union, there were I can run through it real quick. It was pay raises, training, hazard pay, raising union membership to a higher class level, and some HR issues. We will get you the notes on that, and I do believe Ms. Hagnata Murphy had also said she was going to put that in writing, but I'll make sure that we get you the details of all of the issues that were raised there, so we can circle back on that. Next up, we have Councilmember Andrea Boone.
Norman. Commissioner Norman, good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, first, thank you for the improved morale in your department overall. Thank you for working with that staff to bring that group back together. The efficiency during the pandemic has really, really been great. You all have managed to get everyone on board, and it has not gone unnoticed. Mr. Merriweather, who has been very respectful to the unions and have responded to them, we definitely appreciate that. My concern is the janitorial positions. If you recall, maybe several months ago, you and I had to work to get janitors, layers of janitors in our rec centers. I want to make sure that during this time we are not cutting that, because you know you have seniors that go into those facilities. You have some of those are voting precincts. So we want to make sure that we're not struggling looking for different resources to augment the salaries of janitors, and then we have a part-time janitor when you need a full-time janitor. When after school starts again, those facilities can get really, really testy. So we want to make sure that those janitorial positions are full and operating for the next year.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Boone. And yeah, I appreciate having had the ability to work with you in the past to address those issues. And obviously, as we continue to work our way through the effects of COVID-19, the administration has stayed focused and is currently working on plans to ensure the safety not only of the workforce, but the greater public as we move toward reintegration of services, as we move through the 5-phase approach that's been identified by the task force. And so simplistically, clearly we have no intentions on reducing that often mission-critical staff from a sanitization standpoint. And we do recognize the importance of making sure that we stay in a posture to make sure that we can effectively address those needs in the future. So your concerns are noted, and we will definitely make sure we stay focused on maintaining and making sure that we supplement that staff as is needed in the future.
Okay, and I will email you. I really want details on how many janitors we have per rec center, and just to make sure that the staff knows what they have and we're not scrambling in August, September when the school year starts again. But I will address that through email. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Boone. I'm going to give a few more minutes to see if anybody else has a question. While we have you here, Commissioner Norman, will you just give City Council pretty much, I think we've gotten updates from you on this, but I think the public would be interested in hearing how the city is managing its employees and providing all the services that we need to while we're in this remote environment, and any learning lessons you all have had from the HR side on this transition to remote work on efficiencies and employee management, and just, now that we've been doing this for a couple of months, how's it going, and where do you see it going in the future?
Thank you, Councilmember Ide. And so obviously from the unexpected need for the city to transition to a mandatory telework deployment for all of our non-mission critical employees. What we did learn as part of that process is that for the majority of departments, it was a fire drill to ensure that most departments revisited their existing business processes to ensure that we could work collaboratively with AIM to ensure that we were appropriately leveraging the platforms that they have put into place. And so a lot of those things have been evidenced, and I think that the CIO has provided some metrics on, the number of, Teams meetings, because that is a major platform that a lot of those individuals who have been deployed, who can no longer engage in face-to-face meetings, have utilized for team meetings. Obviously we can share documents, and it has full functionality where we have recognized a lot of the efficiencies through a lot of our technological platforms. And we routinely do have these discussions as we continue to assess utilization throughout the city for the employee workforce. And we have successfully transitioned to a posture where for those clearly critical services and most of those non-face-to-face transactional processes where employees have really been committed and in a lot of cases are providing longer hours than they did when we were in a non-telework deployment phase. And so we have really been successful for the majority of our workforce to successfully being able to manage to continue to provide service delivery during this pandemic. Obviously, we understand that as we transition back to a new normal, that we will engage in a retrospective analysis of, what functionality and efficiencies discovered during this telework deployment can be incorporated for a more permanent basis going forward, and also recognizing, I think, that this really was, while it was unplanned, it was also, if you want to have a silver lining, it really has refocused the ability of a lot of departments to really dig deeper into doing and conducting process assessment and employee utilization to ensure that we are really managing our resources and doing work in the most efficient way possible. And so we'll continue to leverage technology and look at those efficiencies as we move forward for FY21, all the while recognizing that because there's still lots of unsureties going forward relative to COVID-19, we will incorporate that, and the administration, I'm sure, will speak to that directly for the re-engagement plan as we move forward through the respective phases.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. All right. I think our last council member who has a question is our District 4, Cleta Winslow.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Norman. I wanted to kind of go back to a little bit of what Councilmember Boone touched on, and it's in regard to public works. They've reported to us, and this was even before the COVID-19, that they were 20% down in terms of staffing. So what I'm wondering is, we've spent a lot of money on equipment to get them restaffed on old trucks that had broken down. So where are we with them on that? I mean, I think they've done a yeoman's job with having been 20% down. But if you stretch that too far, then you get people who end up possibly getting injured because they're in overload mode.
Yes, ma'am. And so, yeah, we have definitely been working with the Department of Public Works to ensure that we assist them to fill their vacancies. And we will go back and I will take a specific look at those numbers and make sure that I coordinate with the Public Works Commissioner. So that is some data that he can also share when they do their presentation on Friday. But I will definitely make a note of that and go back and pull the data so there can be a fully informed discussion regarding that for Friday as part of the Public Works discussion.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Winslow. All right, I think that is it. So thank you so much, Commissioner Norman and your team. This was a great presentation. We will be following up with you on a few of these issues on the union issues and other issues raised. So we'll do that offline, and we will take now about a 19-minute break. We're going to get back together at 11 to hear from the executive offices. So we'll go on mute until 11 a.m. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer I from the Atlanta City Council, representing District 6 and this year's chair of the Finance Executive Committee. Do you have a question, comment, or a suggestion related to the City of Atlanta's proposed fiscal year 2021 budget? The Atlanta City Council wants to hear from residents and stakeholders. Which services do you feel need to be prioritized in the fiscal year 2021 budget, which begins July 1st? The general fund budget is set at $673.4 million. There are several ways to reach out and submit your questions and comments to the Council today and during the virtual Town Hall meeting Tuesday, June 2nd at 6:15 p.m. Send your email to budgettalk@atlantagA.gov. If you'd prefer, you can submit a video of your question, as long as it's 15 seconds or less. For social media, tweet us at ATL Council using the hashtag ATLBudget. Submit your questions by messaging us on our Facebook page at ATL Council. To call in your questions, dial 404-546-1928, or you can text us at 404-548-2885. We know how important the city budget is to you. We welcome your thoughts and your feedback. Thank you.
I've decided to renew the state of emergency for a third time through 11:59 p.m. on July 12th, 2020. This declaration, as you know, plays a critical, important role in our battle against coronavirus.
I'm Phyllis Jackson. Welcome to Stay at Home Connect.
With that extension, Governor Brian Kemp announces reopening guidelines for several entities, including bars and nightclubs, which will be allowed to reopen June 1st, with 39 mandatory guidelines. The new executive order allows for an increase of public gathering sizes up to 25 people in one location, as long as they abide by social distancing rules. Live venues will remain closed for now, but overnight summer camps can open provided they meet 33 guidelines, and amusement parks will be allowed to reopen June 12th, also with mandatory guidelines. Officials from Six Flags of Georgia tell me they've been working on new COVID-19 reopening protocols since March. I spoke with Gene Petriello, Director of Marketing for Six Flags and Whitewater Theme Parks.
In order for you to visit the park, you must make a reservation online. They're going to go through an infrared thermal temperature scan to make sure that they are not experiencing a temperature. And you're going to go through a contactless, security, innovative checkpoint where we will not touch anybody's bag. We are requiring that all our guests wear a mask if you're 3 or older in our park. Both to get into the park and throughout your visit, you must wear your mask.
Infectious disease expert Dr. Carlos Del Rio issues caution with respect to getting out and resuming life in this new COVID-19 reality.
Practice social distance. Be careful. This is not normal times. It will be normal times later. It's not going to be, but it's not right now. And just please be careful. I don't want to see you infected. I don't want to see you become a statistic.
Atlanta City Council member Dustin Hillis introduces legislation prohibiting street racing, a growing problem since the COVID-19 pandemic left many streets with little to no traffic.
Hi, I'm Jennifer I from the Atlanta City Council, representing District 6 and this year's chair of the Finance Executive Committee. Do you have a question, comment, or a suggestion related to the City of Atlanta's proposed fiscal year 2021 budget? The Atlanta City Council wants to hear from residents and stakeholders. Which services do you feel need to be prioritized in the fiscal year 2021 budget, which begins July 1st? The general fund budget is set at $673.4 million. There are several ways to reach out and submit your questions and comments to the Council today and during the virtual town hall meeting Tuesday, June 2nd at 6:15 p.m. Send your email to budgettalk@atlantagA.gov. If you'd prefer, you can submit a video of your question, as long as it's 15 seconds or less. For social media, tweet us at ATL Council using the hashtag ATLBudget. Submit your questions by messaging us on our Facebook page at ATL Council. To call in your questions, dial 404-546-1928, or you can text us at 404-548-2885. We know how important the city budget is to you. We welcome your thoughts and your feedback. Thank you.
Can one girl in a small town, an architect in a major city, and a suburban high school coach shape the future of the United States? Yes, they can. Because every 10 years, the census gives us that power. You can shape your future by responding to the 2020 census. Where do we need new roads to make our lives easier? Where will new school programs help our children thrive? Where could a new health clinic benefit neighborhoods? The 2020 census will inform these decisions and shape how billions of dollars will be distributed to communities like yours each year. And in 2020, you can respond to the census online, by phone, or by mail. It's easy, safe, and important. Make sure you and everyone you know is counted. Now is the time for you to get involved. Your community needs you. Together, we can educate and excite, inspire and make sure every voice is heard. Together, we can shape our future.
I've decided to renew the state of emergency for a third time through 11:59 p.m. on July 12th, 2020. This declaration, as you know, plays a critical, important role in our battle against coronavirus.
I'm Phyllis Jackson. Welcome to Stay at Home Connect.
With that extension, Governor Brian Kemp announces reopening guidelines for several entities, including bars and nightclubs, which will be allowed to reopen June 1st, with 39 mandatory guidelines. The new executive order allows for an increase of public gathering sizes up to 25 people in one location, as long as they abide by social distancing rules. Live venues will remain closed for now, but overnight summer camps can open provided they meet 33 guidelines, and amusement parks will be allowed to reopen June 12th, also with mandatory guidelines. Officials from Six Flags of Georgia tell me they've been working on new COVID-19 reopening protocols since March. I spoke with Gene Petriello, Director of Marketing for Six Flags and Whitewater Theme Parks.
In order for you to visit the park, you must make a reservation online. They're going to go through an infrared thermal scan, temperature scan to make sure that they are not experiencing a temperature. And you're going to go through a contactless, security, innovative checkpoint where we will not touch anybody's bag. We are requiring that all our guests wear a mask if you're 3 or older in our park, both to get into the park and throughout your visit, you must wear your mask.
Infectious disease expert Dr. Carlos Del Rio issues caution with respect to getting out and resuming life in this new COVID-19 reality.
Practice social distance. Be careful. This is not normal times. It will be normal times later. It's not going to be, but it's not right now. And just please be careful. I don't want to see you infected. I don't want to see you become a statistic.
Atlanta City Council member Dustin Hillis introduces legislation prohibiting street racing, a growing problem since the COVID-19 pandemic left many streets with little to no traffic.
Hi, I'm Jennifer I from the Atlanta City Council, representing District 6 and this year's chair of the Finance Executive Committee. Do you have a question, comment, or a suggestion related to the City of Atlanta's proposed fiscal year 2021 budget? The Atlanta City Council wants to hear from residents and stakeholders. Which services do you feel need to be prioritized in the fiscal year 2021 budget, which begins July 1st? The general fund budget is set at $673.4 million. There are several ways to reach out and submit your questions and comments to the Council today and during the virtual town hall meeting Tuesday, June 2nd at 6:15 p.m. Send your email to budgettalk@atlantaga.gov. If you'd prefer, you can submit a video of your question, as long as it's 15 seconds or less. For social media, tweet us at ATL Council using the hashtag ATLBudget. Submit your questions by messaging us on our Facebook page at ATL Council. To call in your questions, dial 404-546-1928, or you can text us at 404-548-2885. We know how important the city budget is to you. We welcome your thoughts and your feedback. Thank you.
I've decided to renew the state of emergency for a third time through 11:59 p.m. on July 12th, 2020. This declaration, as you know, plays a critical, important role in our battle against coronavirus.
I'm Phyllis Jackson. Welcome to Stay at Home Connect.
With that extension, Governor Brian Kemp announces reopening guidelines for several entities, including bars and nightclubs, which will be allowed to reopen June 1st, with 39 mandatory guidelines. The new executive order allows for an increase of public gathering sizes up to 25 people in one location, as long as they abide by social distancing rules. Live venues will remain closed for now, but overnight summer camps can open provided they meet 33 guidelines, and amusement parks will be allowed to reopen June 12th, also with mandatory guidelines. Officials from Six Flags of Georgia tell me they've been working on new COVID-19 reopening protocols since March. I spoke with Gene Petriello, Director of Marketing for Six Flags and Whitewater Theme Parks.
In order for you to visit the park, you must make a reservation online. They're going to go through an infrared thermal temperature scan to make sure that they are not experiencing a temperature. And you're going to go through a contactless, security, innovative checkpoint where we will not touch anybody's bag. We are requiring that all our guests wear a mask if you're 3 or older in our park. Both to get into the park and throughout your visit, you must wear your mask.
Infectious disease expert Dr. Carlos Del Rio issues caution with respect to getting out and resuming life in this new COVID-19 reality.
Practice social distance. Be careful. This is not normal times. It will be normal times later. It's not going to be, but it's not right now. And just please be careful. I don't want to see you infected. I don't want to see you become a statistic.
Atlanta City Council member Dustin Hillis introduces legislation prohibiting street racing, a growing problem since the COVID-19 pandemic left many streets with little to no traffic.
Jennifer I want to welcome everybody back to our budget hearings. The time is now 11 a.m. It's Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020, and we are in our second full week of City Council review of the Mayor's proposed fiscal year 21 budget. This morning at 10 a.m. we heard from Human Resources. In just a few minutes, we're going to hear from our executive offices. The public may view the hearings on Channel 26, Facebook Live, Twitter, the City Council homepage, and YouTube, as well as by listening via the conference bridges. And the presentation materials, if you want to follow along, are available on the Council website located under the Finance Executive Committee Fiscal Year 21 budget. Before we start with the executive offices, I'm going to ask Ms. Kempson-Wright if you'd please do a roll call of City Council members.
Yes. Yes, and I will pause one moment as our controller begins to unmute council members so that all will be heard. Council President Moore. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, while we're waiting for that, council members, if you want to pull your budget books up, the executive offices begins on page 153. All right, Ms. Kempson-Wright, I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, okay. Council President Moore.
Present.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Faroki. Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Winslow. Councilmember Archibald.
Here.
Councilmember Shook.
Aye.
Councilmember Mazikite. Councilmember Hillis.
Here.
Councilmember Boone. Councilmember Overstreet.
Present.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Present.
Councilmember Bond. Councilmember Westmoreland. And Councilmember Dickens. Madam Chair, there are a total of 8 attendees online at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Kempson-Wright, and I'm sure that there are other council members who will be dialing in soon, and I will recognize them once we get to the question and answer section of this presentation. But for now, I'm going to turn it over for our presentation from our executive offices. We're joined this morning by our 60th mayor of the great city of Atlanta, Georgia, Keisha Lance Bottoms, her chief of staff, Carmen Chubb, her chief operating officer, Joshua Williams, and the director of innovation and performance, Matthew Bartlett. So, Madam Mayor, I'm going to hand it over to you, and thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Councilmember Ide. And again, I want to take this time just to thank Council for your partnership and your leadership. And just to share with you all once again how very proud I am of the men and women who work for the city of Atlanta. This has been a very difficult period of time. We thought that COVID-19 was going to be the most surprising thing of 2020. But as we've seen over the last 72 hours, there's still so much more that's in store for us. And I can tell you the amount of restraint and the amount of professionalism, by and large, that's being shown by our first responders has been greatly appreciated. And I don't want to get too far off script. We obviously saw that there were 2 college students who were arrested and who were treated in a way that was not consistent with who we are as a city and in the way that our police officers should represent our city. But given all of the pressures and the stresses of the last 72 hours, I can say that the vast majority of our police officers and personal responders have represented our city well. And I just want to publicly acknowledge that before we begin this morning. This FY21 budget has been difficult for a number of reasons. It's required the team to collaborate remotely
on a compressed timeline at the same time as we've had to manage our operational response to the pandemic and make sense of a challenging, fluid economic outlook. The challenges of the last 72 hours have added another layer of complexity to the work before us. In light of all that is going on, I'd like to use our time this morning to share with you some of my thinking for where I believe we need to focus and where we need to go as an administration and as a city in FY21. Usually, we lead off the presentation with a long list of accomplishments, and we certainly have accomplished a lot in fiscal year 2020 that deserves to be called out. Things like the raises we instituted for our fire department, the $50 million raised through the Home First Atlanta initiative to support people experiencing homelessness, breaking ground on the second App Promise Center, establishing the Office of Inspector General, ending fiscal year 2019, $15 million to the good, which we put into the fund balance reserve, and so many other results that I'm proud we've been able to deliver for the people of Atlanta. But I felt it was important today, and in light of all of the unrest we have witnessed over the past few days, and with the ongoing backdrop of public health and economic challenges we are facing due to COVID-19, to focus this conversation on a few of the key issues reflected in this budget that will be important as we work to keep the city moving forward. I know that you've already heard from Matthew, Joshua, and others throughout this budget process that maintaining service delivery and public safety are two of our key budget objectives. With this proposed budget, we are charting a course that will maintain our workforce, keep our commitment to police and fire raises, make prudent use of the fund balance, avoid raising taxes, and set us on an orderly pathway to find further savings and efficiencies so that we can continue to maintain the financial strength that we have all worked so hard to achieve. As we look around the state and across the country, every day we see new reports of city, county, and state governments that are struggling to maintain services and being forced to implement furloughs and layoffs in order to balance the budget. I'm thankful that we've been able to propose an alternative way forward. At the same time, we're not completely immune to the impacts of the economic downturn. These impacts are visible in this budget in a couple of places. Most notably, we're asking you to support redirecting resources from the East Side TAD to the general fund. And secondly, we're asking for your patience as we press pause on the Housing Opportunity Bond. With regard to the TAD, I'll just say this, in an ideal world, it would be great if we were able to find the money somewhere else. What we are proposing was not in our sights prior to the pandemic hitting. But the reality is, given where we are now, this is an action that we must take. I became comfortable moving forward with the proposal to pallet the city dollars back to the general fund based on 4 considerations. 1, can we legally do it? The advice that I have received is yes, we can. Secondly, will it affect the funding that has been committed to projects that are underway? I have received confirmation that it will not. Third, will we be able to move forward with the proposed projects in the Sweet Auburn corridor? I am told that we will. Fourth, could we have leaned on the other tabs more and the East Side tab less? The information I have received is that we could not, based on the amount of debt those other tabs have outstanding. If we're to maintain a strong financial position, we must move forward with this measure. There are only 3 realistic alternatives, which I believe would each put the city in a worse position. One would be to increase the use of the fund balance reserves to nearly $55 million, which I believe would be irresponsible and unsustainable. The second choice would be to immediately cut expenses by additional $17 million, which would certainly impact our workforce. And third would be to raise taxes, which I also don't believe is the right thing to do when so many businesses and families are struggling. This certainly is a tough decision, but in my view, it is the right one. I also mentioned the Housing Opportunity Bond. As you recall, affordable housing was an issue I campaigned on when I ran for mayor. It was a major pillar of my campaign. I very publicly committed to specific goals, and I remain passionate and committed to making a difference in Atlanta for so many Atlantans who are struggling with affordable housing, and this certainly remains a priority for me. As many of you all know, I even lead the U.S. Conference of Mayors Committee on affordable housing. But the reality is we have to be confident that we can afford to pay the bills associated with a housing opportunity bond. As much as I would like to move forward with this bond at this time, I don't feel that we are in a position to do that today when we are already looking to use $37 million from reserves to balance the budget and to take on an additional 30-year obligation in the general fund at this moment in time would not be prudent. The strategy that I have been pushing the team on is let's focus on finding further savings now. Allow more data to come in that will give us a better sense of the shape of the recovery. Keep pushing to close the gap between revenues and expenses. And let's pick this issue back up as soon as we have a confidence in the data that we can sustain it. My hope is that we find ourselves in that position sooner rather than later. And while we press the pause button on the general fund, while we are pressing the pause button on the affordable housing bond, I think pressing pause on a general fund bond is the right thing to do for the time being. I want you all to know that we are looking at other strategies to keep the city moving forward. I know we're here today to talk about the general fund budget, but I did want to share with you that we are looking closely at our debt service capacity outside of the general fund in order to put much needed investment in our communities and provide a jobs and construction boost for the Atlanta economy. The feedback I've received from the team at this point is that we may be in a position to move forward with a general obligation issuance of up to $400 million without raising taxes. At this scale of investment, we could fund the conversion of the jail to the center of equity that we have talked about. We can enhance our recreation centers, our centers of hope, and make major enhancements in new sidewalks for our communities. We're also exploring whether some of this investment could potentially be used to support land acquisition for affordable housing development. The reality is that any such action will require the support of this council and a referendum of voters. But this is a conversation I'd like to continue with you all once we get through this budget cycle. My hope is that we can work together to align on a set of infrastructure priorities that we could put on the ballot as soon as March of next year. I also wanted to discuss concerns regarding budget for the Department of Corrections. The strategy we are pursuing, which I know you all have already heard from the team, is to go through a process in the coming weeks and months to identify where we can redeploy these employees from the Department of Corrections to other activities across the city. And I just want to interject as well and publicly thank Chief Rodney Bryant for the leadership that he's been providing along Chief Shields as we have been navigating the past 72 hours. I asked Chief Bryant to oversee the coordination of our internal and external partners and to oversee what's happening at the jobs. This is a role that he played while he was Deputy Chief in APD. So it really has been a godsend to have him back in place to be able to work alongside Chief Shields and other leadership at APD to make sure that we've had seamless coordination with the multiple partners that we have had in our city over the past few days. I don't believe it's necessary to leave the personnel and operating dollars sitting in the corrections budget while we continue to work to transition the jail. We'll be seeking to amend this budget to move the funding for the corrections employees out of the corrections budget and into a new Department of Equity and Wellness. We value these corrections employees and will work diligently to find other opportunities for them to continue with the city of Atlanta because, as many of you all are aware, our corrections department operates in a very different space than a traditional corrections department. In so many ways, they are our community
workers, our community employees with boots on the ground, and so we continue to value the work that they provide, but it will not in the long term be in a traditional sense of guarding inmates in our corrections facility. I think this approach is a better reflection of our intent and a clear signal to the residents of Atlanta that we remain committed to our platform of reform. So these are some of the issues that are top of mind for me as we look to the year ahead. I'm hopeful that we can work together over the next couple of weeks to pass a budget for FY21 in the same spirit of cooperation that we passed the last two budgets, so that we can provide a measure of certainty to our employees and turn our attention to all of the work that lies before us in FY21. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Joshua Williams, our COO, and Carmen Chubb, my Chief of Staff, to go into more detail on the operating budget for the executive offices, and then we'll be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. And either Ms. Chubb or Mr. Williams, just jump in. You have the floor.
Joshua, you may be on mute. Well, while we're waiting on Joshua to join us.
Can you all hear me now? I think I'm off mute. Good morning to everybody, and please forgive me for that. We just got the mute addressed. And thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council Member Odd, for the opportunity, and good morning to all of our council members in hearing and viewing public. Joshua Williams, Chief Operating Officer here with the City of Atlanta. I hope you and your families are doing well during this unprecedented times. Last year at this time, I gave you an overview of the functions and the responsibilities that reside within the Office of the COO. Before I jump into those specific details for FY21, I would like to make a few high-level points about the budget for the executive offices overall. Let me first start by saying the general fund budget for the executive offices is $18.3 million, which is down by more than 1.5 from the budget we adopted in FY20. There are three main things driving this reduction. First, we're transferring funding for 3 staff positions from the Office of Human Services. 2 individuals will transfer through the personnel paper to the Department of Grants and Community Development, and 1 to the Department of Parks and Recreation. Second, we are aligned with our operating groups in terms of not funding vacant positions, as many of you have heard from our previous budget discussions previously. This accounts for a reduction of roughly 7 FTEs from FY20. Third, we are reducing operating budgets across all divisions within the executive offices by $650,000, or more than 10%, in order to make a savings contribution to the overall budget. As you know, a number of critical citywide functions flow through the executive office's budget. Things such as warming center activations, staffing our affordable housing efforts, support for the arts, providing constituent service support, coordinating emergency preparedness, funding for key regional memberships with ASEMA as well as the ARC. We realize that the executive offices needs to continue to lead by example when it comes to being efficient with these resources, and we believe that this budget is reflective of that. We have worked with each division leader within the executive office to identify ways to meet the savings reflected in this budget while maintaining these core activities. With that said, I'm going to walk through a quick overview of our offices under my purview and turn it over to Ms. Chubb to discuss the functional areas that report directly under the Chief of Staff. First and foremost, the Office of the COO involves overall leadership and coordination of city operations. There are around 20 operating departments and roughly 9,000 FTEs that report up through the COO. Many of these departments have presented, as I stated, their FY21 plans to you already, and there will be others this week that will follow as we work through our remaining budget hearings. In this capacity, I'm supported by 2 deputies, John Keene as well as Justin Johnson, as well as an executive assistant. Also within the COO's office is the city's emergency preparedness function. This office leads our efforts to coordinate multiple internal and external agencies to plan for and to respond to a wide range of situations that require comprehensive citywide response, as we've all seen with the pandemic, as well as the protests that we all have read and have seen throughout the city. You all have seen and heard from Felipe Denbrock, who's our Executive Director over Emergency Preparedness, who's provided this leadership role for the city in managing these COVID response efforts in partnership as well with our Public Safety Department. Third is the Office of Contract Compliance. The Contract Compliance team facilitates equal opportunity for all businesses to participate in city contracts by administering the city's diversity programs. The team plays this important role through overseeing, monitoring, and reporting on contract implementation across the length and breadth of our city operations. Next is the Office of Innovation and Performance, which is responsible for coordinating the annual budget development process, leading on strategy development for operations while overseeing the city's performance management program and coordinating cross-cutting operational projects. I'll be working with Matthew and his team over the next several weeks to help drive many of the efficiency plans that we've discussed as we work through this process and throughout the rest of our budget hearings. Then we also have the Office of Film and Entertainment, which plays a key role in liaising with the film and television industry and administering permits for all film activities taking place within the city. This has become a major industry in Georgia, as many of you know, as evidenced by the volume of permits the team has issued in each of the past several years. Also under operations is the International Affairs Office, which facilitates international trade, economic development, tourism, as well as cultural initiatives on behalf of the city. It serves as the city's liaison to consular corps, as well as advises on and coordinates visits by foreign dignitaries and manages sister city relationships. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Chubb, who will walk through an overview of the Office of the Chief of Staff. Carmen?
Thank you, Joshua, and good morning, council members. I'm glad to be with you today to give you an overview of the Office of the Chief of Staff and the key functions that my team will deliver with this FY21 budget. The Office of the Chief of Staff comprises 5 teams that I will talk about in just a moment. At a high level, all of the work that we do ties back to Mayor Bottom's One Atlanta vision and 3 critical functions in particular: serving as the mayor's liaison to key internal and external constituencies, communicating, coordinating, and implementing all policy and legislative activities for the administration, and advocating for, promoting, and serving Atlanta's residents, businesses, and community organizations. The mayor's office is supported in this area by 2 deputies, Philip Gilman and Jerome Jordan. I'll go through each of the offices and give you a brief overview. First is the Office of Communications, which handles all media inquiries for the administration and manages the administration's outreach to the community through speeches, press releases, interviews, and social media. Also within the Executive Office's communication function is Channel 26, which is responsible for recording and broadcasting all council meetings and committee meetings, covering events like the Mayor's State of the City Address, producing original content, and airing public service announcements. Next is the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. This office team is our liaison to the City Council, the General Assembly, the federal government, and surrounding jurisdictional agencies. This office works to advance the city's interests in local, state, and federal policy-making processes. The team has continued to play a key role supporting the mayor in conversations with the state regarding the airport and serving as our liaison to Washington in order to understand federal policies and guidelines related to the CARES Act and the Coronavirus Relief Fund. It also serves as the administration's liaison to City Council. Next is Constituent Services, which provides a direct linkage between the residents of Atlanta and the mayor's office. The work this office does includes addressing resident concerns and complaints, supporting residents in times of need, and outreach and representation in the community through community and town hall meetings and support for neighborhood organizations. Next, I'll talk about cultural affairs, which provides a variety of cultural programming. In addition to arts and events programming, the cultural affairs team provides educational opportunities to Atlantic school children, managing funding for the arts, which this administration has increased in the past 2 years, oversees the Elevate program, and undertakes other public art and cultural initiatives to make art accessible to everyone. The final group I will speak about is One Atlanta, which brings together our work on key issues including resilience and sustainability, economic mobility, equity, public health, LGBTQ affairs, and Atlanta's welcoming and inclusion efforts. The One Atlanta team remains deeply engaged in the reimagining of the jail. Our partnership with Fulton County related to access to PrEP, efforts to make progress on the city's clean energy plan, as well as the My Brother's Keeper initiative and supporting our affordable housing efforts. That concludes our prepared presentation, and we thank you for this opportunity to present our budget and are happy to take questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chubb, Mr. Williams, and Mayor Bottoms. Let me see. I am sure that I have council members lined up. So, colleagues, put your virtual hand up to get into line. I do just want to ask a follow-up. That was fantastic news about ACDC and the budget amendments coming, because I think all of us have been getting questions about, funding the jail when we've had the hard work of the task force, moving us in a different direction. And so did I hear correctly that there will be amendments to the current year budget, and then there may also be further adjustments during the course of the year?
If we can let Matthew jump in and give some details on that.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council Member. Yeah, so that is the plan. So the amendment, as the Mayor stated, for this budget would move the funding for those resources into that Department of Equity and Wellness. And as Joshua leads the process that we outlined earlier in the fiscal condition, any opportunities that arise there, we would be looking to move forward as well.
Okay. And Council Member, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I'm going to assume also we have to create this new department.
That will be part of it, yes.
Okay.
And Councilmember Ide, no, that's okay. I was reminded of something Joe Biden often says, show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities. And I thought it important that we not just move it into another department, which would have been an easy administrative thing for us to do. But in light of where we are and the need for us to make it abundantly clear to our communities that this is a priority and we are committed to this, it's the reason that we have decided to put forth these changes so that it's clearly delineated in our budget.
Oh, I think it's a fantastic approach, and I appreciate that. And I think, I have been trying to explain to people that we've just been the timing has not been great on wrapping up the work of the task force and how that aligned with the budget process. So I'm thrilled with this solution that we are, making a public commitment in this budget to start the transition. So thank you and your team for that. All right,
Councilmember, if you don't mind, I'll just to kind of help provide additional clarity. This will be similar to what we did with DPW's transition to ADOT. That same type of approach where we set up the department, we work collaboratively with the employees and staff to make sure that we can have that appropriate alignment with the new department. It will be a very similar process as we did, just as a point of reference, as we've all walked through that recently with the Department of Transportation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Williams. All right, I'm going to call on Mr. Shook first, then Councilmember Boone, then Mr. Hillis, and anybody else continue to put up your virtual hand, and I'll get you in the lineup. So, Mr. Shook.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to Mayor and your team. Your delivery and your presentation here was incredibly focused, all the more remarkable considering all the other challenges y'all are going through. I also want to thank you for not making us work as hard as we have in the past to try to tease out your FTE and budget numbers across the various activities which are within your unit. So thank you very much for that. As regards to jail, and maybe it was said, but I just missed it, how much, if any, of the funding currently allocated for the jail do you propose to go towards our budget mess? Thank you.
Matthew, can you give some additional clarity on that?
Yeah, sure. So, Councilmember Shook, as you are aware, a good chunk of the existing corrections budget reflects funding for those employees, and so that funding will move to the new department for those individuals. So, as the mayor outlined, we're looking to keep those folks and go through a process to identify where we redeploy them across the city.
Okay, so the creation of this department and reallocation of the resources that support it will not be part of any sort of strategy around making this budget easier to live with. The dollars are just simply going to be all of the money will simply be reallocated.
In the short term, that is correct, sir. And then, as we've mentioned before, including the fiscal presentation and during corrections presentation as well, there's a process that Joshua will be leading to look at efficiencies across the city.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shook. I believe I had Councilmember Andrea Boone is next.
Then your entire Mayor Bottoms, thank you all so much, your entire team. I want to bring attention to the wonderful work that the Mayor's Office of Constituent Services has done over the past 60 days. They have done a consistent job with taking care of the seniors all across this city. They have gotten in their vehicles. They have not slept. They have delivered fresh produce, vegetables, fruit, juice, bread to folks that would never have gotten these items. I want to make sure that the budget that they have includes continues to include the rental assistance, their vehicles, and that they just have everything they need, because I'm sure everyone now sees the value in that office. Mr. Bailey has done a wonderful job with his team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Boone. Councilmember Hillis.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ide, and thank you, Madam Mayor, and your team for the presentation. And just wanted to commend the awesome work that has been done to make this budget work in these trying times with COVID-19, looking towards alternative revenue sources and keeping our taxes and our millage rate down. So, again, just wanted to commend you all, and I'm sure the work will continue this current budget year and for fiscal year 21, as this will likely be a moving target. So, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hillis. Next, I have Councilmember Joy Shepard.
Thank you, Mayor Bottom, and all of the staff, everyone involved. I believe some of the questions were already answered in reference to the ACDC, but I know we're having a presentation at our Public Safety Committee next week in terms of a breakdown of what's going to happen with that entity, but I am questioning, again, what Mr. Schick was saying financially as we transition to this correctional facility to something else, is that going to happen right away? Is it going to take over a year? I know if we talk about the Department of Transportation, it's taking a moment, and I'm not saying we should just transfer the money or actually look at the budget in terms of how much money we project for next year. So I'm interested in seeing what will happen next week at the public safety meeting. I will be asking more questions, but thank you for your support. Now, again, thank you all for everything else. The other question I want to ask in terms of what's happening with the protests and all of the manpower and all the power that's going in from all our staff across the city, how is that going to have any impact on our budget coming forward for 2021?
We don't have solid numbers around that yet, Council Member, but it's something that has been top of mind and we're closely tracking. And there have also been discussions on whether or not we need to make a formal ask, a world formal ask be created as a sign-on letter from the U.S. Conference for Mayors for additional support to cities directly, given the budget deficits that we're already facing and the amount of money that's coming out of our respective budgets to have to cover additional public safety personnel. But we don't have a firm answer to that right now. But Matthew or Joshua, I don't know if you have additional information.
Yes, Madam Mayor, this is Joshua. I think you've nailed it. We certainly will be coming back with additional clarity around that as we continue to work through that process. I do, Council Member Shepherd, want to know, as I mentioned in the fiscal condition of the city presentation regarding the process that will stand up, my expectation is very, very soon we'll be conducting a thorough operational assessment of the Corrections Department in the upcoming weeks, as we've talked about. That intended process will bring together relevant stakeholders as well as resources necessary to drive through a couple of things that I think are important operationally. One, to review the operating budget of the department where we can see where there's further reductions that are feasible, to the points that you and Council Member Schiff made that can help drive and possibly be provided to help support the budget as we currently see it. Number two would be to move forward as we work through the transition of the facility in partnership and support of the mayor's vision to reimagine what the Atlanta Detention Center would look like moving forward. And then certainly as we think through this process, as has been mentioned, the work of the dedicated men and women within the department, there will be opportunities to redeploy them through that process to other operational community-based priorities throughout the city. So we will be working through that. We'll be looking to bring in the appropriate individuals and stakeholders and resources to help drive that, and we'll be able to outline that in more detail as we move forward. We do have staff ready and teed up to present an update on the ACDC reimagining effort during the next public safety committee meeting, as you've asked, and we'll be prepared to have more detailed conversation at that time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have. Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Next, I have Councilmember Natalie Archibald.
Thank you very much, and I do echo all of the positive sentiments that you've heard from my colleagues, Mayor Bottoms. I think you and your team have done an amazing job. Really glad that you were able to figure out through your team how to get our city employees who are working at the airport and who were depending upon MARTA and not able to get home after the curfew. So every problem that's been identified, you and your team have been very, very responsive, and couldn't be more proud and happy with the team in place. My question is relative to the Eastside tax. I am impressed with the careful analysis that you conducted, the four-pronged sort of analysis of four critical issues. Issue 3, when you mentioned Sweet Auburn, and that is at the core of the remaining concerns that I have around the what will happen with the Eastside tab moving forward. And so, Mayor, my question is, for all of those who've been contacting me, and I'm sure other council members who touch on the Eastside tab, what is the forum through which we can have a conversation around those outstanding concerns and those things that are not yet funded but are on the horizon that will be hurt by the plans that are currently before us?
Well, certainly, Council Member, there's an opportunity for us to speak with you directly internally about that. If this is a more public conversation, we will have to discuss how to facilitate that given our current circumstances, but our team remains available to speak with you directly to give you additional information, and if there's a need for more public discourse, then we can just figure out the best way to facilitate that.
So on your team, and I know Invest Atlanta is available as a resource, but on your team, who is the point person in particular?
Matthew Bartley will be the appropriate person.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'll talk to Mr. Bartley offline. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Archibong. And I have been asking for some additional information through Mr. Bartley and Invest Atlanta that we should be receiving as far as sort of history of Eastside TAD and what projects are in the lineup on that, and I'll share that as soon as we get that. Next up, I have Councilmember Marcy Overstreet.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chair Ide. More comment because my questions have pretty much been answered, but the change of landscape that your administration has had to do over this entire year has really been dramatic, you know, from the Inspector General's office, just really changing the landscape of the way we do business in Atlanta, to ATL DOT, our new grants department. All of these are newly constructed departments with new budgets, and to compound that with our unbudgeted COVID responses, I just want to commend you and your entire team for all of the insight and flexibility and forthrightness that you guys have been putting through for this entire year. I'm very proud to be on the front line with you all and the rest of all of our Atlanta City employees during this time, because it really has taken a lot, and you all have really stood up to the test. And I feel very confident that even though this budget is going to be shorter than what we would like because of all of the obstacles and the pandemic and all that we've had to deal with for this whole year, I feel confident that we're going to be able to address the issues going forward as we always have. Council has gone out of our way to make sure we're making budget sacrifices as well, and I just think that as a city council administration that we are doing right by our citizens, and that's a really good feeling in such a horrible, unprecedented time. And so I just want to thank you for that. And so that will be all. Thank you, Chair Ide.
Thank you, Council Member. Thank you, Councilmember Overstreet. Next up, I have Councilmember J.P. Metzko.
Thank you, Chairman Ide. Mayor Bottoms and team, I'll just briefly continue the love fest here. Y'all have done an incredible job delivering a budget in a very, very uncertain time and balancing the need to make sure that we deliver services, that we do put money where our priorities are, that we keep our promises and keep our commitment to our people, our employees, and making sure that we think of them. So I commend you and your team on the budget that you put together. I'm a fiscal conservative, and knowing what we know now, I feel really good about this budget. The future is going to be uncertain as we go into a time that probably we'll have a recession in front of us. And one request that I'd like to make is that together, we are sure that we are keeping our finger on the pulse of how revenues are coming in, because they're going to be very uncertain as we move forward and we see how the economy plays out, and that together we look at that information and make any adjustments that are necessary as we go forward to turn the dials up or down. So this will be a very different process moving forward than we have had in the past. We can't just shut the budget book and say we're done. We will not be done with this budget for months because we have to continue to monitor the situation and make any necessary adjustments. I know you all are committed to that. I just wanted to throw that out there and ask for you guys to think about what that process would be and how we would work through that together as the months go forward. Thank you again for all you're doing and making us proud. That's it for me.
The system has detected that a minimum number of lines are connected to this conference. Do you want to continue your
Chairman,
All right. Thank you, Mr. Manscott. I'm going to make the last call to my colleagues. If anybody else has a question or a comment, let me know, and I'll get you in line there. I want to say thank you, Mayor, to your team, particularly to Mr. Williams and Mr. Bartlett about the time and energy that they have put into this budget and the way they have made themselves available to me for questions and comments and digging deep down into things. So they have been a fantastic team in making this a collaborative process, so I really do appreciate their work. All right, it looks like we have one last question with Councilmember Antonio Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for all the hard work you've put in during this budget process. Thank you to Mr. Bartlett and Mr. Williams for working with Council to convey our questions and concerns around the budget. Thank you to Mayor Bottoms for your leadership through this process. Over this budget process, I've raised several possible solutions with finance and your executive leadership team to address opportunities to limit the need to utilize the Eastside TAD at the full extent in which we've budgeted. I've been speaking with our bond attorneys on a measure that was used back in 2008 during the recession by the city of Atlanta called a scoop and toss, which would allow us to reallocate our bond servicing payments being budgeted. And currently within this budget, we have about $84 million being budgeted through our bond servicing payments. And I wanted to find out, because after speaking with our bond attorneys, not only has this method been used in the past, but they believe that this could be a viable opportunity for us to address some of our revenue shortfalls.
And I'm sorry, Councilmember, can you tell me which attorney that is you've spoken with?
Yes, but can I tell you off? I'd rather not just publicly mention their name just on this call. I can speak to you about it off the record. But it's definitely one of our bond attorneys that works with the city. And so I've made a request to Mr. Council on identifying bonds that are maturing within 90 days, in which that are coming due in this fiscal year. And, I think that this should be a measure that we should give equal weight to in considering before we just immediately tap into the Eastside TAD. I'm not sure because I would need to see a list of all the bonds and maturity dates with regards to the $84 million that has been budgeted. But I do think that if we could work together, Mayor Bottoms, with finance and looking into this as a possible solution, I think there is a a strong possibility that we could alleviate a lot of what we're experiencing around the pushback of having to leverage the East Side TAD to address our budget needs.
And thank you, Council Member. And the reason that I asked that, we tried to look at all of our options because we know that closing the East Side TAD is not something that many of the council members have previously expressed an unwillingness to do. So this is certainly a last resort option for us. That's why I asked the name of that attorney, because if there are other options that we are not aware of, then we will need to hear directly from that person so that we can ask the appropriate questions and better understand what their proposal is. But we are taking a look at all of our financing and refinancing opportunities right now. This is a comprehensive look because obviously our budget we're in a position that we have not found ourselves in a very long time as a governmental entity. Time is of the essence. We do know that we have to pass this budget in just a few weeks. And so if there are other options out there, we'll just need the name of that attorney who made that recommendation so that we can discuss with them details.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Mayor, and I'll definitely convey the attorney that I've spoken with. They handle all of the city's bonds. But basically, and I'm not sure if Mr. Council is listening on this call, but the technical term is a scoop and toss. And basically, it's refinancing a single maturity, taking 1 year and basically refinancing it. So it basically takes the maturity due dates in the year and the following year, and it tosses them at the back end of the amortization schedule. But I've conveyed this to council. I've spoken to Mr. Williams and Mr. Bartley, before I even reached out to our bond attorneys. But I do think that it was done in 2008, so I know for sure we can do it. It's just determining which bonds are coming up for maturity within the next 90 days. And the process, I've asked about the process and the timing, and I recognize that we have to pass the budget, but I also recognize that there's also opportunity that we may need to amend the budget, and if throughout the year, and even if this takes longer than a few weeks, and we have to amend the budget and then reallocate those dollars back into the East Side TAD, then I think that that's still worth us really exploring this opportunity, especially given that we've already done it before one time in the past when we've experienced financial hardship within the city. So I appreciate your support, Mayor Bottoms, and after this call, I will definitely email over the attorney's information so you all could have that conversation to work through this.
Thank you. And just something I wanted to mention that's a bit off subject, but I know Councilmember Shook, there was a lot of damage in the commercial areas of your district as well as across the city of Atlanta. Something I have failed to mention during our press briefings is that Invest Atlanta has been on our ATL Strong page. There is a landing page with information for businesses, small businesses in particular, to access, to receive assistance to help with the repairs of their businesses. And Eloise and her team can provide additional information on that as well.
All right, thank you so much, Mayor Bottoms. Looks like that is the end of council member questions and comments. It does sound like maybe we're going to need to look for an opportunity to have a further discussion about the East Side TAD. I mean, I have spent a lot of time with this budget with Mr. Williams and Mr. Bartley and Mr. Council, and it's just a really hard year, and I think it wouldn't be my first choice on the East Side TAD, but if that's not what we do, we have to come up with another solution, and there aren't any, there's not a real easy other solution to identify, but I do think it's, it's important enough that it, demands having a full conversation about it. So Mayor Bottoms will circle back with you and your team and see if there is a possibility of finding some other time to carve out just for this specific topic, because it wasn't, even though it relates to Invest Atlanta, it wasn't something that we dove into too deeply in their presentation time. So if you all would be open to finding a time to discuss this aspect of the budget specifically, I think that could be helpful on just making sure we've checked all the boxes and looked at all the options in front of us.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
But with that, I just want to thank you, Madam Mayor, for everything that you're doing for this city. I think all of my colleagues, share the sentiment that you are doing an exceptional job in an extremely trying time, and it's evident to all of us, and I hope to everybody in the city, how much you love this city and how much you want to see us come out of this, stronger and more united. So I know it's been a difficult last week for you, but you're really doing a tremendous job with your leadership. Thank you and your team for your presentation today. This was incredibly informative and went way beyond the presentation of executive offices budgets, but we thank you for giving us these the broad overview on these other important topics. And with that, we are going to take a break, and we will be back at 1 o'clock for our afternoon session in the budget hearings.